Hello everyone, in this video we are going to talk about how to read like a scholar. So the tip that you are gaining in this video is how to annotate a source, which may be reviewed for you if you learned this in English 101. I do recommend taking some notes. All right, so first I want you to think about how you read. Do you scroll through social media? Do you read news articles online? Maybe you seek them out like you're a reader of the New York Times, or maybe they pop up in your social media. Might you skim websites for specific information when you're looking for something? Do you read your text messages? So let's think about what these all have in common. Online and casual reading involves a lot of skimming quickly, looking for information. There's a lot of research out there that says that when we are reading online, which is a lot of what we do when we read casually, our eyes don't just go over every line. They jump around in an F-shaped pattern. So we're going to go across the top, and then we're going to go down the left side, and then maybe over every once in a while. So maybe an F or an E shape. But if you had a book or an article or something on paper right in front of you, our eyes tend to read in a much more linear fashion, moving over each line individually. So when we jump around the page like that, the information we're very passive, and you may not remember what you read. So if you're one of those people who says like, oh, I'm just not a strong reader. I read and then I don't retain anything. It may be because this is the type of reading that you're more accustomed to doing. And it does work okay for everyday details and everyday purposes, right? But we're talking about academic reading in English 102. So we're going to want to adjust and read a little bit differently. And like I said, I do have a tip for you today on how to read more actively. So just a reminder that reading in college requires us to understand complex and dense material. We're going to have to remember key information for later use. Maybe we need to write about it, or we're going to be asked to take a test. We may need to identify and be able to trace how an argument is built. We're going to need to be able to evaluate evidence critically so we don't end up using a source in our writing that isn't a strong source. We're going to need to be able to make connections between ideas, or a word that you're going to hear a lot in this class is synthesis. We're going to need to be able to understand our material well enough that we can do synthesis, which is making connections between different pieces that we've read. We're going to need to be able to understand what we've read well enough that we can answer questions about it and have opinions about what we've read. So here's our challenge. Our brains want to skim things, but that doesn't work in academic writing. So what are we to do? All right, well, welcome to the stage, my good friend, annotation. Annotation is active reading made visible. It is a bridge between skimming and reading. So if your brain is not yet wanting to just read actively and retain that information, annotation is a really good tip for you. So when you annotate, here's how this works. You're going to mark up the text as you read. You could either print if you'd like, or you can do this online. You write notes, questions, reactions, your thoughts, your opinions in the margins, and it makes your thinking visible on the page. I also like to say it's like having a conversation with the piece that you are reading. So it's going to transform that passive reading that you've been doing into active thinking as you read. And as a bonus tip, let's say you still forget what you read, and that's okay, because now when you come back to that document, you have all of your notes, and it's like a cheat sheet to get you into that information very quickly. So as a review, why do we annotate? Annotation helps you stay focused and engaged. It's going to help you better understand and remember what you read. We're going to do a lot of classroom discussion in English 102. It's going to help you to be prepared for class discussion. It's going to help you write the questions that you need to bring so that class discussion can happen. You may be able to identify passages that you want to return to when you're writing your research papers. So, this is a really great fact or study. I know that this is going to go really well in my second argument of that argument paper. You're going to note it so that you could go back to it very quickly. And again, you're going to continue to develop your own ideas in conversation with that text. So here is a little acronym that Professor Jacobus and I like to use to organize our thoughts when we annotate. So if you're thinking, what do I write notes about? Here's a trick for you. Remember FIRE. So fire is F is looking at the format. So what kind of piece of writing is this? Are there headers and subheaders? Are there titles? Are there images on the page? Information is where you note key ideas, main points, etc. Like this is where you're looking at facts and starting to understand the argument that the author is creating. R is for rhetoric. This is a word that you would have run into in English 101. You'll hear it a lot more in English 102. Rhetoric is the art of creating an argument. So this is where you may look at the author's purpose, who the audience is. Are you noting any bias? Are there some rhetorical choices like really strong words, analogies? Are they slipping into fallacies? This is where you're noting the art of their argument. And then E is for elaboration. This is where we are inviting you to put your own ideas on the page. So you're making meaning, you're generating your own ideas, you're making connections. If you have a question, you might do this as E, elaboration. If there's a word you've run into that you don't know, you are elaborating when you circle that word and find that definition. A few other symbols that some students find helpful is the question mark. I'm confused. I have a question. I need to go back to this. Exclamation point. Maybe something is really important. It's surprising. It's interesting. And an arrow means it's going to connect to something else in another reading, class discussion, or your own experience. And with each of these, I recommend not just using the symbol, but a symbol and just a couple words to remind yourself when you return to this article what that symbol was meaning. So use both, use fire and use those symbols in addition. And then think about things that you might do like circling or highlighting a subheading for format. You might put an exclamation point next to a surprising statistic. You might write, why this audience? Like, why are they writing to this audience in the margins for rhetoric? You might draw an arrow and say like, this reminds me of the filter bubble article and make those connections for elaboration. Here's a reading that most people tackle in English 101. So this is an excerpt of Audrey Enrich's speech that she gave in the 1970s called Claiming an Education. This is an example of what it looked like when I was annotating. I like to combine some color coding. I like to label my F, I, R, and E, and I might also add in, a question mark or an exclamation point somewhere in there as well. So what you're seeing is that I'm highlighting the piece that I'm making a note about, and then I'm adding a note in the margin. Frequently in this class, when we give you an article to read, we will give it to you in this structure where you have that bar on the right-hand side. If you don't have that though, our CQ researcher, our databases will allow you to annotate text and then download those as Google Docs. You can also print them and do it old school like I used to in the 90s. That is my preferred way to read. Remember, because I don't like that F pattern that my eyeballs make. And I really like the tactile sensation of highlighting and putting notes in the margins. So that's up to you if you have access to a printer. All right, that is it for this quick lesson. If you missed anything, please go back, check it out, put it in your notes. This week, you are going to be reading an article called Disconnected but Hopeful by the National Civic League. Your task is to watch the video tutorial. So, that we just had. You're going to read that article carefully. You're going to annotate it using fire and symbols. You're going to aim for 2 to 3 annotations per paragraph and make sure that you're using all 4 fire categories at least once. So yes, just to clarify, you are going to see Disconnected but Hopeful this week, but you will also see another article very likely that is about people being disconnected from their local news. So one or the other, same exercise. Watch this video, read the article, annotate, and just know that I'm going to have you submit your evidence so I could just see how you're doing with this. All right, everybody, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in class.